Hey everybody, Rob here. It's time for a few stories from the ProRevenge archives. First one, you won't pay rent? Good luck finding a new apartment. Let's jump right in. Hit that subscribe button for more Reddit revenge stories. So this happened to me about 10 years ago in a big city on the West Coast. Hopefully, this counts as ProRevenge. I had just finished grad school and was looking for a way to cut down on rent in an already expensive rental market. Now, mind you, I was young, desperate, and inexperienced with roommates at the time, and this was a huge life lesson for me, and hopefully for my roommate too. I placed an ad for a roommate on Craigslist, which in hindsight wasn't a smart move. Enter Bad Roommate. Bad Roommate was a few years older than me, and at first seemed really cool with a stable job as a licensed masseuse. After interviewing her, hitting it off really well, and getting to know each other for about a month, we rented a loft in downtown around October. With the agreement, rent and utilities would be split. Around the time our first rent was due, November, Bad Roommate said that her work had been slow and she would pay rent in the next 2 weeks. Luckily, I had enough in savings, so I covered rent. Well, the 2 weeks came and went and still no rent. When I asked her about the rent, she yelled obscenities and accused me of being abusive and harassing her. No kidding. While claiming she didn't have money for rent, she would be out of the house from around 9 a.m. until around 2 a.m. visiting friends. All of this nonsense continued on, as well as other things such as stealing my food and breaking some of my belongings, including a bottle of wine that my recently deceased sister had gifted to me. Bad Roommate's excuse was bad energy in the house, while giving me a little smirk. Fast forward to the beginning of December and you guessed it, still no rent. This time, in addition to yelling obscenities, accusing me of being abusive, and breaking my stuff, Bad Roommate called the police on me, accusing me of making threats. The cops did not do anything as there was no evidence I did anything. For the record, I didn't. But they did give me a lecture about making threats and said next time they come out, I could be arrested or forced to leave the residence. By this time, I was almost out of savings and was fearing eviction. Bad Roommate had not paid rent since moving in. The final straw came when I came home from work to find her threatening my 2 cats, who were cowering in the corner. I almost lost it, but due to what happened before with the police, I didn't want to poke the fire. This is when I remembered the officer saying I could be forced to leave the residence, and a light bulb went off in my head. Now, the revenge part. I called my best friend whose father was an attorney. After a phone consultation with him, he told me to pay up the rent and utilities through December, and then simply surrender my key, garage remote, etc. with a signed note saying that I surrendered possession of the property with a specified date. I snapped a photo of this note and left it with the secretary in the management office. I then proceeded to sign a new lease with the last of my savings. 1 week before Christmas, while Bad Roommate was out visiting friends, I packed up all of my belongings and left the house pretty much empty, except for the little bit of belongings she had, a little bit of food, and her bed. After about 2 days of angry voicemails, texts, and missed calls from Bad Roommate telling me what a horrible and irresponsible person I was to do this, boom, dead silence until April. In April, I was served with a summons for breach of contract for abandoning the lease by the landlord. I contacted the attorney and filed a response to the court with a hearing date set in late May. I showed up to the hearing with my friend's dad and his 2, I'm guessing they were assistants. Bad Roommate was also there looking smug. Think wine bottle incident smirk. Next thing I know, the other attorney announces they are dismissing me from the lawsuit since I surrendered possession of the property, but they were not dismissing it against Bad Roommate. Bad Roommate's face went gaunt. The smirk disappeared and it was priceless. After some back and forth with her, almost getting held in contempt of court for outburst, the judge ruled against my roommate with full judgment awarded to the landlord. The first cherry on top, best friend's dad represented me pro bono. The final cherry on top, I came to find out a month later via an angry voicemail from Bad Roommate that after being kicked out of a friend's house while couch surfing, her credit was trashed. She had an eviction on her record and subsequently could not get another apartment, and that, again, I was a horrible, irresponsible person. I never heard from her again afterwards, but she was on the news a few months later, mugshot and all, for trashing a convenience store. Last I heard, she moved to Las Vegas. In the end, my credit did take a small hit. Even though the suit was dismissed, the debt was put into collections and reported to the credit bureau. For the next 4 years, I tried unsuccessfully to have it removed. At the 4-year anniversary of the lawsuit, I petitioned the credit bureau under the advice of my friend's dad to clear my record as the statute for filing suit had expired at the 4-year mark. Failure to comply with the request would result in a lawsuit against the credit bureau for slander of credit. To be honest, I just followed his instructions not knowing what I was even talking about. A couple days later, I received a call that my record had been cleared. Long story, but in the end it was worth it to get back at an otherwise horrible person. The roommate sounds like a rent scammer, or what we call here a professional tenant, one who spends as long as they can in each place until they get kicked out for not paying a penny. Then they move on to the next one, lather, rinse, repeat. On to our next story. Ignore me asking for my deposit? That's cool. You can just pay me triple then. Let's jump right in. A few years back, I rented a duplex. I lived in it, I moved out, nothing special. During the move-out inspection, they did the standard landlord thing and looked for any excuse to deduct from the deposit. They knew from the lease agreement that we had pets. So, of course, the first thing the inspector says entering the house is, "I smell animals. We'll have to charge you the cost of getting a special pet odor removing cleaning service." We were right there to call him on his BS with the invoice and paperwork from the cleaning service that already did a comprehensive clean, including a pet odor package. He quickly dropped that BS. Then, he found a carpet stain which, despite everyone's best efforts, never completely came out. Fair enough. We were relieved that they didn't take much off for that at all. Then, he took a little more off for having to patch some holes where we hung photos. In the end, we were still owed at least 80 to 90% of our original deposit. They also told us we needed to keep the utilities running in our name for a week after we move out so they can do some work on the place. This wasn't in our lease as something that's required of us, but I was nice and extended my utilities an extra week for them. Then, they told us to extend the utilities another 2 weeks because they weren't done. Enough was enough, so I told them no. They gave us a statement of how much our deposit was, how much they deducted and for what, and how much was left over for us. By the books, until they didn't actually deliver it. I tried giving them the benefit of the doubt, but they had our mailing address for our next place and it never turned up. I called them, emailed them twice a week, asking if they've mailed it or if I can just pick it up from their office. No answer, no reply. They were completely ghosting us. We found out that the state law says if your deposit, minus deductions, isn't paid within 30 days of vacating, you can take your landlord to court for up to 3 times the amount of the original deposit, no deductions. We read and studied this law well and concluded that there's no reason we shouldn't be able to fight this and win. No lawyer required. A $90 filing fee later, and our landlord was served notice of our intent. Then, whoa, what do you know? After all that ghosting for 45-ish days, the day after we filed our petition, we get an email from the landlord saying he sees that we're wanting to take legal action, but has a tremendous offer for us to settle out of court. The full deposit, no deductions, plus the $90 filing fee back. F their lowball offer. I replied, reminding them that I can force them to pay 3 times the deposit, but I will settle out of court for just twice the deposit. Did I need to settle? I don't know. The law says up to 3 times, so I guess I was worried that if it actually went to court, a judge might decide that the circumstances aren't bad enough to warrant that much more money for me, so it might not be worth the trouble. Twice was good enough for me, and making them lose money over it was what I was going for anyways. They agreed immediately and said I could pick up the check at their office. When I stopped by, what still confuses me to this day was that they still insisted on showing me the report of all the things wrong with the house that they had to deduct from the original deposit. Like I gave a f at that point. That ship had sailed. They were paying me twice the full deposit anyways. They could stick their petty, unfulfilled deductions up their ass. Closing thoughts. Do landlords do this often? Why would they just blatantly withhold your deposit without giving a reason? Do they think people won't fight for it back? Do the people who don't fight it outnumber the ones that do? Meaning they can make a profit by withholding everyone's deposit by default? Well, OP, I think that's just it. People don't hold landlords responsible enough. And we need more stories like these to get out so that people know that they have options and they can take those landlords to court. On to our next story. Guy steals $400 of gas, but I get the last laugh. Let's jump right in. I used to work at a marina when I was in high school that sold gas and allowed people to dock for free if they wanted to. Now, one day a guy comes in on a pretty big boat and gets a lot of gas, like $400 worth of gas. He comes to the counter to pay and gives me $400 in $100 bills, and I accept them, and he goes on his merry way. Fast forward a week or so, and I'm told by my boss that the bills he paid in were all counterfeit bills. Unfortunately, as he paid in cash, we had no way of tracking him down, so we think that he just got away with stealing $400 worth of gas. That is, until this idiot comes back after about a month and a half, thinking he got away with stealing the gas. When he comes back, I recognize the guy and tell my coworker to call the police right away. However, I knew that this guy would just leave if I let on that I had recognized him, and we had discovered his plot to get free gas, so I decided to pretend I don't recognize him. Luckily for me, this guy asks to dock the boat for about an hour or so on our dock, and I tell him it's not a problem. Now, it is policy to get the name and phone number of customers using free dockage, as well as asking that they leave the keys in the boat so that we can move the boat to a different dock if needed. He complies to all of the rules and leaves his boat, and he leaves his keys with me. After probably about 15 minutes of waiting, the police show up on the dock and ask my boss where the guy is. My boss tells them he just left his boat, but we have his number and can get him to come back to the boat, and he then instructs me to do just that. At this point, I was pissed at this dude for making me look dumb for basically losing $400, so I call him and tell him, "Hey, this is me from the marina. It seems as though there's an issue with your engine and it seems to be smoking." For those that don't know boats that well, engines are very expensive, and this one in particular was a 350 horsepower Yamaha engine, which is top of the line, so that man got back to that boat in record time. When he got back to the boat, the look on his face when he saw the two cops waiting for him was priceless. He tried to play it off and act like he had done nothing wrong, and he didn't know why the police were there, but that was short-lived as they arrested him and told him why he was being arrested. Turns out, the guy had almost $2,000 in counterfeit $100 bills on him. I want to show you guys how sometimes employees just don't pay attention to what's going on. My wife and I owned a convenience store going back about 8 or 9 years now, and we had one of our employees take this as a regular bill. I'll just let that photo speak for itself. I want to thank all three OPs for posting their stories to the ProRevenge subreddit. You can visit them at the links in the description below. Please go there and give them an upvote. Once again, this is Rob from Karma Comment Chameleon saying thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and share it with your friends, and we'll see you in the next one.